Matthew chapter 21 for a moment. I mean, if you go through the book of Matthew alone, you see this phrase that it might be fulfilled 9 times in the book of Matthew alone. So God spoke some things. He prophesied some things using people. And then the things he prophesied many times years in advance came to pass. In fact, if you were to look at, go through the Bible, I don't want to take you to all these places because of time and because I don't want you falling asleep on me. You find, here's a couple of prophecies about Jesus' life that were written years in advance that came to pass. One of them was that around the time of his birth, all the babies 2 years and under would be murdered in search of him. Now, if you were to go to Matthew 2:16 and 17, you can write that down if you want. King Herod is looking for Jesus. He wants to kill him. He doesn't know where he is, so he sends an order out. All the children that are 2 years and under are murdered. All the males, I believe, were murdered. Well, if you were to go to Jeremiah 31:15, and the book of Jeremiah was written in between 637 and 586 BC. Anybody remember what BC stands for? Before Christ. In other words, about 600 years before Jesus ever came. And no historian's going to, no self-respecting historian's going to argue about when these books we're about to talk about were written. It was written 600 years before he came. It prophesied that all the babies 2 years and under would be murdered in search of the Messiah. Another one is that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. The one that's called the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. Well, in Luke chapter 2, we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. But if you go back to Micah chapter 5, the book of Micah was written around 700 BC, 700 years before Jesus was born. It said he'd be born in this little town because Bethlehem was not a major city. I mean, if you're going to pick a city to have the king born in, you're not going to pick Bethlehem. And yet it prophesied in this little town, the one who people would consider to be the Messiah would be born. Of course, we know that happened. Another one was that it would be said he was born of a virgin. Well, if you were to go to Matthew 1, 20 through 25, you'll find that that's what the Bible says about it. But if you go back to Isaiah chapter 7, and of course, you know the book of Isaiah was written 700 plus years before Jesus came. And even if you go back to Genesis chapter 3, it prophesies that the Messiah would be born of a virgin. We can go on that he will be a healer. It's found in, we know in Matthew 8 that he was, and so many other places. Isaiah 53 prophesied that he'd be crucified with and counted as a sinner. We know that happened. Isaiah prophesied that they would hold a lottery for his clothes. We know the Bible talks about that. But of course, that was prophesied in Psalms, which was written almost 1,000 years before his birth. That not one of his bones would be broken when he would be crucified. That has significance because one of the things they would do when they crucified a person is after a while, they hung up there for a while, and they were ready for them to die, they would break their legs. So when the time came to break Jesus' legs, they broke the legs of the 2 guys that were with him. But when they got to him, he was already dead. The Bible says not one of his bones were broken. Well, that was prophesied in the book of Psalms 1,000 years before he ever came. That he would rise from the dead. Well, you know, we wouldn't be standing here today if that's something that people don't believe happened. And frankly, it's historically true. It's historically accurate. No one's found his body yet or his tomb. Every time somebody thinks they have, they end up getting debunked. You know, they end up embarrassing themselves. Okay? And we'll get into some more proofs of that. But that was prophesied in Psalms. Now, here's the thought. How can Isaiah and Zechariah and Micah and so many others, I mean, there are 109 prophecies about the Messiah in the Old Testament. And the mathematical odds of 20 of those prophecies being fulfilled in the life of one person is 1 quadrillion, 145 trillion to 1. Yet there was one person that fulfilled all 109 prophecies. How is that possible? I mean, that's mathematically impossible. There's no way that happens on accident. The only way that happens is if there is a screenwriter who wrote the play. Come on. If there's somebody sitting outside of time who spoke through different people who many times didn't know each other, didn't read what each other wrote, and told us these things before they happened, so when they happened, we would believe. I mean, if you look at the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, you'll notice the Bible is the story of Jesus. You know, from Genesis 3, we see the first mentions of his coming. And then if you go through every single book of the Bible, there is prophecy or there is mention about Jesus. And even when you get to the end in the book of Revelation, it tells you that the spirit of prophecy is ultimately Jesus. Is ultimately Jesus. The Bible is the story of Jesus. So one of the things that we can say is that Jesus is the Messiah the Bible prophesied about. And really this is what they were thinking about, Matthew 21. They had been told and prophesied to that the day was coming when a Messiah was coming, when a Christ was coming, and that he was the one that will fulfill all these prophecies. He was the one that God would use to save Israel. And biblically speaking and intellectually speaking, we can see that Jesus is Messiah. He is prophecy fulfilled.